Welcome to another episode of Zwick's Flicks, the Ed Zwick podcast. I am Ryan, your host, and returning guest co-host with me today is Scott. Thank you and welcome back.
Well, thank you for having me for a second time. I must have done at least a decent job to be brought back.
You did a great job.
My disparaging remarks on your favorite movie about the Legends of the Fall still kept me in your wheelhouse to bring back.
Did we talk about you reinvestigating the film?
We did, and you know what? I'll be honest. I have not had a chance yet, as school started over here. So when we recorded, it was just at the beginning, and it's been kind of nuts. So, but the winter's coming, right? So, wintertime is usually when I get my most of movie watching in, right? Like on the weekends, I'll watch 3-4 movies on a Saturday because it's cold and snowy, and it just kind of allows for you to kind of relax and kind of pull back a bit, which is I always enjoy. A lot of people are like, I hate the winter. I'm like, well, I get my most movie watching down the winter. I kind of enjoy when it comes. So yes, I promise if I'm ever on again on this one or another one, I will have a new rebuttal for what I believed about Legends of the Fall.
Well, that kind of ties in a little bit with something I've considered since our last recording, because this podcast is designed to be it is a limited series, but I do have the tendency to drag out my limited stuff only because I'm having so much fun with this with his films. But if you know Ed Zwick at all, you know that he didn't just direct. He also wrote, produced, and executive produced quite a few films. So I thought about, well, you know what I'm going to do when I'm done his main filmography, the movies that he directly directed that went to feature film type films. I'm going to tackle the films that he produced, executive produced, and or wrote, because I like doing film reviews, and he's done a whole bunch of different work within Hollywood where his fingerprints have been on them besides just directing. So yes, you'll be on again is what I'm trying to say. So you're going to be back on again. For example, he produced Shakespeare in Love was a film he produced. I don't know if you knew that.
I did not.
He was originally going to direct it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That might have been a different film.
It might have been a different film. That's what I'm getting at. So there's a lot of different films which I wouldn't think I would ever review or talk about on a podcast. I thought, you know what, this would be kind of interesting to talk about films like Shakespeare in Love, for example. Scott, before we talk about the film, of course,
no worries.
Tell people where they can find you on other podcasts.
Yeah, so you can find me on the Church of Tarantino. That is my main podcast. We are just about to close out season 3. We will be starting season 4, which I thought I would make it smaller, but it's gotten bigger because now I'm going to do 2 Patreon exclusive shows, and you'll be one of the first guests on one of those. So we're moving back into at the church after putting to bed the 30-year retrospective of Pulp Fiction. We're going to go back into more of a all things Tarantino talking. The main episode will be called Ranking Tarantino. I will give the church's official top 5 in a category, and there's a lot of categories to pull from, badass chicks to villains to side characters to dialogue moments to almost anything, weapons. I've already got 60 possibilities that we could go through. So that at least gives me at least 5 seasons more to go extra.
Sure.
And then I always have my Inglorious Blue Balls, which is where myself and my co-host Sean Wheeler, we have always gone through all of the announcements that we have found Tarantino has made on some sort of another, gone through them, found out what the announcement was, why they didn't work out, give some hypotheticals, what we thought it would be, and then what level of blue balls it left us with. But the new 2 shows are going to be, I'm bringing back what was called the Bible study from season 1, but it's expanding. So every month I'm going through the movies in chronological order, and we're just picking one chapter from the DVD Blu-ray, and we're going to discuss that. So each month it's a different movie, different chapter. So that brings it more chance to talk. And then you are going to be my first guest on Tarantino-esque film review, which is a list of movies that people say are Tarantino-esque, films that were inspired by or fall into the crime category that he kind of subgenre he kind of created with Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. And you'll be my first guest doing LA Confidential. So
yeah, I love it.
Yeah, it's exciting. And then I still do on your network. We still do the Men of Action and Dropping a Bruce. We are doing the Lord's work. I can just tell you that. We're taking bullets for all of you folks. We're taking the bullets for you.
Every time I see a new Dropping the Bruce drop on the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network, I think to myself, poor Bruce, what a legacy.
I know. The wild thing is when we were going to start it, he had not been announced.
No,
I think I told you the story where right before Steve and I are about to start that podcast, I'm telling you, we were in the pre-production phase of setting it up, how we're going to do the recordings. All of a sudden, the family comes out with that. So we put that on the shelf for a year. Now doing it the way we are, we're seeing the aphasia poke through.
Ooh.
We're seeing where it happens.
On
so like
screen.
It gives us a brand new perspective because, going into it without knowing that, we'd be like, what the fuck is happening to Bruce Willis? Why is he such a shit actor now? Now that you know what you now see it. It's kind of like, oh, someone in your family has got a drug habit or something like that. And they're like, why didn't we ever notice that? And then you go back and look at old videos or pictures. You go, oh, we should have noticed that. Uncle David was always wiping his nose and sniffing. How do we not know he had a coke habit? It is one of those retrospectives where we now are seeing, as we're getting closer to the end of it, where it's really, some days you're just like, there have been, one we just released, 25 pages of dialogue were written for him. He does almost none of it. He's on set for a day. He looks confused, even in the scenes. Like it gets bad. It's hard to watch. Well, you're a Stallone fan. Imagine Stallone had this. Imagine watching your hero deteriorate in front of your eye.
You have to retire. So it's too bad. It's too bad. It's sad. All right. Well, thanks for coming on again. Last time we met together, we did the Siege. If you recall, that was a great one. I had a lot of fun talking about that. It looks like we're diving into another war story. Yeah. So before we get into Defiance, had you seen this film before preparing to come on the podcast today?
I had not. I had missed this one, and was one of the reasons when you asked about it, I said yes, because I'm always down for watching a new film, especially a film that I wanted to watch, but for some reason gets behind you. Life one day you're like, yeah, I want to see this movie, and then it goes out of your cineplexes, and then you don't know what streaming service it goes to, and you forget about it, and then all of a sudden, one day you're slipping through Netflix or something else, and you're like, oh my God, that's right. I wanted to see that film like 7 years ago. So you hit play, and then I love Daniel Craig. I enjoy these kind of true war stories, especially when you said Zwick, because one of my favorite of his is Glory. So I hadn't had a chance to see it, but I'm glad that we got a chance to see it finally.
Zwick seems to enjoy his war films. Glory, Legends of the Fall, Courage Under Fire, The Siege, The Last Samurai, Blood Diamond, now Defiance. All of these big, bombastic, weapon firing, death, carnage, travesty. I'll give Zwick credit, tackling very big topics that are controversial. And every time he does this, he got criticism. We talked about it when we covered The Siege. So if you're listening to this, haven't listened to that episode, please check it out. He always tackles these ideas, whether they're historical or, fictionized, but of a real thing. He tackles these big topics, and I got to give him full credit. Now, I don't want to spoil the next episode. The next episode is Love and Other Drugs. I haven't got to that part in his book because I've been listening to his book while I watched the two. I don't get ahead, so I don't know what his reasons were to do Love and Other Drugs, but talk about a shift. Defiance is this film, which of course has warfare. It's a true story. It's brutal. And then he does Love and Other Drugs, which is a very intimate drama, a little bit of comedy with Jake Gyllenhaal and Anne Hathaway, and there's not one gunfire. There's no blood. You wouldn't even know it was him. When I watched that film, again, I don't want to spoil too much of my discussion for that film, but I just like, that's him? What happened? So I'll be curious to hear his thoughts, why the change of gears.
Is Zwick by chance Jewish?
He is.
Maybe. The only thing I can think is the shift is, when you deal with the Holocaust, that's a very touchy subject, especially if you're of the Jewish faith. And so maybe he was like, look, that's heavy. And I'd like to do something that's really light now. I kind of want to just have a little, hey, let's do a romantic comedy. I need to get out of these doldrums. Spielberg had a really tough time when he was doing Schindler's List. Like, it's not an easy topic to tackle.
That was probably what it was. Something a little bit lighter, different. If you want to see Anne Hathaway nude for a large portion of film, she's nude in the whole film.
Who doesn't want to see?
Have you seen the film? She's nude.
Yes, she's.
Well, Jake Gyllenhaal looks great too. Let's be fair. I'm saying both.
Yeah,
they're fantastic looking people.
Yeah.
When he's nude in that film, I'm looking at my body. I'm like, ugh, thanks, buddy.
I know. Yeah. But hey, look, he's rich. He's got personal trainers. He's got the time. He gets paid to get into these shapes. So,
well, Daniel Craig was not nude in this film, however. So
he was not.
I think Ed Zwick's tackling this, him with his Jewish background, his personal connection to the people of this time. I actually thought to myself, though I'm not comparing the films because we know how big and grand Schindler's List was, this is his Schindler's List. That's how I kind of view it. This is a director tackling something very close to him, his history, his people. It's also a true story. One I never knew about. I mean,
I know, it was amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah, did you ever hear of this story before?
No, never.
This is a 2008 war drama that tells the extraordinary story of now, I apologize, folks, when I mispronounce names. Just don't at me too hard. The Bielski brothers?
I think that's pretty close. At least they sound like they said in the movie.
This is the gripping tale of resilience, survival, and humanity, which brings to life a lesser-known chapter of World War II. So what is this chapter? Well, in the summer of 1941, Nazi forces swept through Belarus, leaving devastation in their wake. Amid this horror, the Bielski brothers, Tuvia, Zeus, Agiel, and Aaron, fled to the dense Naliboki forest after the murder of their parents. And it was here in the thick wilderness that the story of defiance began. The brothers not only survived, but established a hidden community, rescuing Jewish refugees and building a safe haven against impossible odds. Their makeshift village included schools, a hospital, and a nursery, an extraordinary accomplishment in the middle of a war zone. By the time they left the forest, their group had saved over 12,000 lives, which ended up being in the tens of thousands of genealogy of
generational
posterity.
growth.
Yeah. So another Schindler's List to a degree.
The one brother played by Liev Schreiber, he's a little upset by saving some of the richer, posher Jews who looked down on them because they were actually labor intensive Jews. It was interesting because I'd never seen that kind of class warfare between the Jewish population before. You know, it hadn't been portrayed on television in that way or in the movies in that way. Even in Schindler's List, there wasn't this setup by Spielberg. They're like, oh, we're saving the rich Jews, the poor Jews. Like, it was just like we have to save all these Jews from the ghetto. And so I'd never seen there being a rift within the community based on a hierarchy.
Did you know the story at all, or did you look at a trailer, or did you go in cold? I went in cold. I
went in cold. Didn't know what country it was in. I'll be honest. I thought it would be like Poland or East. I didn't know, or West. I didn't know so far East over near Russia. I just knew that some Jews had gone into the forest, and I wasn't sure if they'd saved people. I thought they'd actually formed it was like a resistance force.
Yeah,
I thought they were more of a resistance force than what the movie actually was.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, I went in totally blind too. It wasn't until about halfway through the film that I did some Wikipedia search just to see. I wanted to see if the brothers were real. I know it said inspired by a true story or based on a true story. I got that, but I was like, oh, there were real brothers. I saw their pictures. Fascinating. They all survived. Spoiler: they all survived the war except for I think it was the middle brother, Agiel.
Yeah, the one brother who kind of takes the lead around towards the end.
He ironically joins the military and dies in battle.
6 months later.
Isn't that crazy that he survives hiding from Nazis in the forest for 2 years, but dies in battle? So
that's part of the defiance, isn't it? Right? That's what they kind of say. That's their defiance. We're not going to die in the ghettos. You're not going to put us to death the way you want to. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die doing it on my feet. Then that's kind of the point of the story.
As we always do on this show, on this podcast, we go through, of course, the big talking points, of course, are the actors and, of course, Ed Zwick's journey within the films. We have some audio clips from his book that we'll discuss at the end of the show, the last third of the show, I guess you could say. This is your second time being on the show. You've already given your thoughts on Ed Zwick. So if people want to hear your thoughts on him as a filmmaker and your history, please go check out the Siege episode where you expressed all that. All the same, how do you think Ed did on this film? What did you think of the look, the aesthetic, the feel? Did he do a good job directing this film? What's your overall thoughts on him?
I think he did pretty good. He's playing in a playground that's tough, right? Because you're always going to get compared to like a Schindler's List. It's unfair. If a story comes out before yours, and it's a good one, you're going to get compared to whether it's fair or not. I think he did a good job of diverted from showing the horrors of the thing. He kept it to what the brothers were insulated to. So the one brother saw the pit, the open pit where they murdered people and then threw the lie on them. And so that was the only thing we really get. And then we just focus on what it was like to live in the forest, to even show the inner fightings that happen within people. So they're trying to stay alive from either the Belarus people who have been paid off by the Nazis to find them, or from the Nazis themselves. They're not sure if the Russians are going to protect them. And then they're also infighting with each other because as you have to drop your humanity in order to survive and give up the comforts you used to have, they start to argue with each other and almost start to kill each other because it's tense living in the woods with very limited resources. I thought he did a great job of bringing a true life story to life. They spent a year in the woods before that Nazi thing that moves them away. We have to find something that's going to bring a little bit of drama and move the story forward. It just can't be people coughing and being freezing in the snow, right? We've got to add a few things in to make it exciting.
Can you imagine? Just a 2-hour film.
2 hours of just people coughing and eating soup.
What I found fascinating, of course, about this film is you couldn't help but think, of course, of the Jewish filmmaker with a film is something about the Holocaust, you can't help but think of the connection with Steven Spielberg's, Schindler's List. I would rather watch this film again than Schindler's List, which is not to say Schindler's List is a worse film, but it's such a difficult film to watch.
I would say Schindler's List is a heavy film. It's one of those films like you watch it once and you're like,
yeah,
I don't know that I ever need to see it again because it's so emotionally taxing. It's devastating. It's a devastating film because it dives into the horrors of that. He leans heavily into what the Jewish people went through in this time and what Schindler was trying to do to save them. And the dancing he had to do to try to save more Jews when the Germans were trying to eliminate as many Jews as they possibly could. This movie's a little different. This is about survival. That one is just, the weight of what's happening in every frame.
Well, you can almost liken it that Schindler's List is, how should I say this? I don't mean to be glib about this. It's like the Star Wars franchise, the first 6 films, let's say, and then Defiance is Rogue One.
Yeah, yes, it's an offshoot. Yes. Yeah, it's a furthering story. What else? While this was going on, this was happening.
Exactly, and that's how I kind of look at it, because you could watch Schindler's List and to educate, let's say, your children about the horrors and the travesties of the Holocaust, and then you can say, but look, here too is a tale of survival and overcoming great odds. But let's say you're an alien coming down to Earth and watching Defiance for the first time. Show me this Holocaust situation. You'd watch this, and the alien might say, doesn't seem that bad.
No, that's fair. From what you see on screen, you're right. You're like, well, okay, yeah, it sucks. They're starving, but other than that, they got off easier, I guess. So you could say comparatively to the other experiences.
When they have these discussions, they go back to the town to talk to the Jewish rabbi, and when they're trying to get people out of that area, and when they have people coming to their camp escaping, if you were that alien watching this film, you'd be like, I don't know what they're escaping. What are they afraid of? But when you know Schindler's List, like, you're wholly aware of, okay, we understand what they're fleeing from. Of course, people know the Holocaust, but I'm just saying, when you watch this as a film, we don't need to see Schindler's List again. We understand the travesty, the horror, the pain. This film says, okay, that stuff is happening. We don't need to keep showcasing it. However, we're showcasing a little bit of hope, a little bit of a victory, that there's people here who are hiding and they're winning. Despite that, though, they still struggle with each other because we're just humans. They're still bickering, fighting. Even within their camp, there is class warfare when you have the soldiers saying, we as soldiers should get more food than the people we're protecting.
Because if you think about what you just said about the soldiers feeling that way, that's not how a soldier thinks.
No,
right? Like a soldier doesn't think that we deserve more because we do more. You're actually taught that you need to learn how to live with less, and that others need it more than you do. So that's how you can tell that those people who were they were thrown into roles of soldiers, right? Well, they were civilians who now were basically a militia. But that's why militias and thinking they're going to go up against an army,
it's a different training.
It's a whole different mindset. You being angry about something and thinking you could defend your farm, it's a little different than what we know how to do and what we're willing to go through and been trained to go through. It's interesting to see how they perceived it. And you could lean into, if you're not from the military, thinking, well, if they're out there putting their lives on the line, why wouldn't they get more? But then I was always taught, and whether that's a fair thing or not, but women and children first, right? So the women and the children get fed first. Then you will get your food, whatever you need. Like, your needs come last. Your family comes first, right? You make sure that your family, your wife and kids will always have more before you ever have anything. That's where Tuvia was in the mindset of. But he also wanted to make it equal, because if it's not equal, being in the forest where there is no class system, you are all the same people. You have to have an equal balance system, or it will tip out of balance and then anarchy ensues, right? There has to be some kind of structure. And the best structure he could come up with is that everyone gets an equal share. Everyone does an equal share of work too, though. So the men put themselves on the line.
Go, honey. You go out there.
That's right. Would you feel good about going and sending your wife and kids? Hey, here you go. Take the guns. Good luck and get out there. And
I'll cut the potatoes.
Yeah. And it's not like I don't think women can handle it, but just as a man, I have this inner belief that, no, it's my responsibility as the man of my family to defend and protect. I'm the one who should be out there fighting the Nazis and protecting them, not like being like, hey, send my wife and daughter out there to go do it with no training, no anything. So
this is what I love about doing this podcast. I mean, obviously, just go see the film. And I love the discussions that all films and art brings to the table. And that's what I like that we do is we talk about the things that the film elicits responses. Us as a viewer, we watch something and elicits a reaction to how would we do in the situation. I'm certainly the same way. Women and children first. I totally agree. It's in my nature too. But what I like about this film, and I'm certain this happened during this time as well, is Tuvia, played by Daniel Craig, he does tell, hey, we're all here to support and protect each other. So yes, women will fight.
They learn to use weapons. If the men are out in the field and they get overrun, you're going to have to defend yourself. The reason you left where you were is because you don't want the atrocities that are happening to happen to you. So we're in the forest. If we're going to die, we're going to die because we are living, not because we were captured and we were then put through the horror that is going on in the rest of Europe at that moment.
I'd rather die in battle than
rather die on my feet than live on my knees. 100%.
Now, it's funny. This won't be a long discussion on actors because I usually just focus on the actors I kind of know. Of course, this is a film that has a lot of actors I just don't know, but I like how they cast either local or people that were up.
They cast it really well. Cast a Jewish group because who else is going to be able to
of course
dig into an ancestry and probably have some family members who have survived or were lost in the Holocaust. Yeah. So who better to really lean into a supporting character where you have to bring that experience to life? You and I aren't going to be cast. I don't have that experience.
They did cast people that weren't obviously Jewish.
Yeah, well, there are leads. I don't think maybe Liev might have been.
What we will talk about are the four main leads, which happens to be the four brothers. Now, the top three Build people, of course, I knew. We'll get to them. But the fourth brother, the youngest brother who played Aaron, I did not know this actor, but he's working a lot in Hollywood right now. He was 16 at the time. His name is George MacKay. Have you seen this guy before?
He's 32 now. It makes sense. For the fact that he looked that he was 16, he looked younger.
He looked like he was 10 to 12. I'm not even joking. Go back and look at that film, folks. But he was 16 during that film.
His young face, I've seen it now older. What are some of the films he's now been in? Because I know I've seen it.
I don't recognize a lot of the films. He's a stage actor as well.
So he was in 1917. He was the lead in 1917, the movie 1917.
Yes.
That's why
I was getting to that. I was getting to that.
Oh, I apologize.
Okay, so George MacKay, who played Aaron, I don't know much about him other than, he was in that film, 1917. That's probably his biggest film, that if you say that film, people, that film, okay. But he's been in TV, stage. He's got BAFTA wins. He's got satellite wins. He's got British independent film wins. The guy he's doing fine. He's working on a film right now called Mission. It's an upcoming British film written and directed by Paul Wright, starring him. So he's doing fine.
He killed it in 1917. He kills it in that. A lot of one takes. I mean, it's a beautifully designed film. A really good movie. You'd really enjoy it.
No, I want to see it, and I love Sam Mendes as a director. 1917 came out 5 years ago, and it's getting to that point where it's like, man, I just have to see the film. It just keeps skipping me by. Right?
I know.
Every day goes by that I don't see it. It's just another day that goes by that I don't see it. Speaking of Defiance, first time viewing, yes, me too. I missed this film. I didn't see this film until watching it for the podcast. I'm getting to the point now in Ed's career where I admit Ed's films, they weren't quite the huge bombastic films that they were in the past. Doesn't mean they weren't good. I'm just saying, so I wasn't going to Ed's films the way I was in the past, or films in general. So I'm getting to the point now in the podcast journey is what I'm saying, where I'm seeing his films for the first time as it goes on. I think the only film that I've seen from now to the end of his filmography is Jack Reacher 2. So that's George MacKay. The third brother, of course, is played by Jamie Bell. This was a name I knew without even having to, look it up. I didn't know he was in the film to watch this a few days ago. He's 38 now. He, of course, had that big breakout role with Billy Elliot. Did you ever see that movie, Billy Elliot? Fun film. Been, of course, tons of films that we've all seen. Big ones lately were like Snowpiercer was a big one that he was in. He played Tintin, The Adventures of Tintin. That was him. He's currently working on a film right now called Rose Bush Pruning. Television was his big deal. He did that for 4 years. He was the main role in the TV show called Turn, Washington Spies. That was actually a very well done TV show. Yep. So very accomplished, good actor. The all four brothers, let's just be honest, played by incredible actors.
We get heavier to get to the top.
We get heavier as it goes on. But Jamie did a great job playing third youngest or third kid, and he's got 3 kids himself now. He's married to the actress Kate Mara.
Really? Well, good for him.
His first wife for 2 years was Evan Rachel Wood, actually.
So he's made his way to Hollywood.
He's a handsome fella, and he's not much more to say about Jamie other than just he did a very good job in the film, and
the show Turn was a really good show on AMC. Yes. It was a really fun, really good show. If you like spy stuff, that's the American star of the American Spies during the Revolutionary time. It was really well done. He's really good in the show.
And another British actor. He, of course, is from Billingham, County Durham, England. So we have another British actor. He's not the last one either. Ed pronounced his name Liev, by the way. Like he actually gave it 2 syllables.
Really?
Liev. Yeah, in his book. So maybe that is how it's pronounced. I've always said Liev Schreiber too.
Me too.
I think it's a Liev or Liev. He actually says
it
Liev.
might. It might actually be. But if you're after a while, if people know you Liev, you just don't fucking correct it. You're in Hollywood.
Yeah.
Like I don't have the time.
Well, yeah.
Or do I care? You know what I mean? As long as the check is spelled properly, call me Liev, Liv, whatever you want to call me. Just keep calling me so I keep getting work.
So of course he was born Isaac Liev Schreiber. He is now 57, by the way.
If you like any of the American football stuff they do on HBO when they do the Hard Knocks, he is the voice. They call him the voice of God. He is the voice of Hard Knocks. So any HBO special, he's got a great voice. He does great voiceovers, but he usually does any of the HBO specials. Like they used to do the journey to every year they had the outdoor game, and he would do a lot of the voicing of that when they would talk about the two teams getting ready for that game. There'd be like a 4-week series, and then they'd have the game, and he'd do like the voice for it. So he's a great voiceover actor, especially when it comes to anything HBO sports related. So if anyone listens or watches any of the HBO sports documentaries, most likely Liev is going to be your man who's the voice.
Of course, I love or admire him for being married or with one of my favorite actresses and one of the most gorgeous actresses in Hollywood ever, Naomi Watts.
Yeah, still with her, I believe.
No. They broke up in 2016.
Damn, I've had 8 years and I've let it go. Well,
yeah, I know. I'm sure she's. I'm sure she's moved on.
I'm sure she's moved on.
She's 56 now.
The ages of 50s and 60s and 70s have changed.
Oh yeah.
Just due to all the stuff in our foods and medicine and stuff. But when my grandparents were 60, they looked like Wilford Brimley in his 40s. You know what I mean? Like I thought when I was going to get to 60, I was going to look like grumpy old men. And now you look at like Demi Moore and you look at like Brad Pitt and these guys, you're like, I'm going to look pretty decent. Like, not as good as them. I'll put a pin in that. But at least I have a chance to have at least mature a little bit better than my grandparents in their 60s.
We're doing it fine. Liev Schreiber has remarried. He's been married now for 5 or 6 years to his new wife. She is 24 years his junior, so good for him. It must be nice being handsome and
rich and famous. Yes. No, listen, being rich and famous really helps.
Yeah, you don't even have to be handsome.
Like if you're just poor, you're not gonna get these hot people. But when you aren't poor, you have a real good shot.
They've been together for 5-7 years. They're fine, but yeah, good for him. Okay, so let's talk about his role in the film as the second oldest brother, Zeus. Great name, but it's spelled Z-U or Z-U-S. What are your thoughts on Liev's role as Zeus? Now, I should also say, he does have Jewish background. His father was Protestant and his mother is Jewish.
If your mother is Jewish, that makes you Jewish. If your father is Jewish and he doesn't marry a Jewish woman, that's where the line ends.
Really?
That's just like for Sicilian, if you're a Sicilian, your mother must be Sicilian. If she is not Sicilian, you are no longer Sicilian.
His grandfather, so his mother's father, Alex Milgram, emigrated from the Ukraine, and his mother is Jewish. There you go.
Which is perfect because Belarus is over in the former Soviet Union area.
That's right.
As is the Ukraine. So Liev actually is playing a character from a place where he's actually, has blood ties too.
So what did you think of Liev's role in this film?
You don't realize how big he is, like as a stature as a man. Like he really even kind of towers over James Bond there. He's the brother who finds the parents dead and shot. He, for whatever reason, we never learn where Tuvia is prior to the events because we're kind of thrown into the events immediately. We're thrown into the invasion of Germany into Russia, into Belarus, and we don't know where Tuvia is. And we're just kind of 3 brothers are coming home. They like hid in the woods and they find their parents dead. And then finally Tuvia shows up in the woods later. Yeah. So at first we think Liev, you forget that he's not the main brother, but he is kind of the main brother. He's the more hot-headed. He's more about my survival is going to be fighting these bastards, where Tuvia's is I'm going to keep my people alive. And they have this similar feeling for it, but there's definitely infighting. Great thing about these 2 actors is we were able to understand that there's a family history of them, like maybe Liev's character trying to always live up to Tuvia. Tuvia's been held on a pedestal his whole life by his parents probably. And so you feel like Liev has always been trying to in the shadow of his brother. So when they finally have their falling out, it's kind of fun to see that the way that they were able to share that with us, just in some looks with each other. You kind of felt that brotherly kind of like competition between them, even though we know in real life they're not brothers. And so I thought Liev was great. He's the better person to look like the soldier or the person who wants to go fight. Like, I think that people were cast properly. Liev gave you the impression that he was tougher, was going to go and be the one who would save the day, would be like the G.I. Joe type who would go head on into battle, where you definitely felt more of Tuvia's character being more practical, I guess, thinking practically, how do I get survival as opposed to running into the bullets? How do we go around the bullets? That's Tuvia's thought process, where Zeus's process is, let's go and take them on and get rid of them.
I thought too, because it's starring Daniel Craig, that he would be quote unquote the tough guy, so to speak, for the film, but he was more of the tender, softer individual or brother who was a little bit more even keeled, level headed, but still tough. All the brothers were tough. You have to be to survive in the wilderness. But Liev's portrayal of Zeus was awesome. He just seems to have this gravitas as an actor. Everything he's in, it's funny. I've never seen a film of his because he's in it. And I know it sounds terrible. There's a few actors like that. But when he's in a film, I think, well, great. What a great treat. Isn't that great that he's in the film? Because I like this guy.
He's a great character actor.
Like, I've gone to see a Tom Cruise film. I go to that film because Tom Cruise is in. I'm not going to lie to you. I've done that. Same with people like Mel Gibson, Stallone. I mean, all these big actors we grew up with. I didn't even care what the film was. Oh, they're in it. I'm seeing it. Those days are almost kind of gone. Liev is a actor where, again, when he's in the film that I wanted to see and he happens to be in it, I think to myself, oh, this film just got elevated. So it's a great compliment. I think that when he's in a film, it just elevates it, because when he's in a scene, I never feel like, oh, this guy's is he sleeping on the job? Is he, his voice alone? He's got that, you talk about that voice, he's got that voice. It's like a deeper Tom Hanks voice. He's just got this great way of speaking, his dialect or the clipping of his voice, the way he speaks. Of course, he's got a towering presence too. He's a big boy, and he's not bad looking. No wonder he's in Hollywood. I thought he did a great job. And I've always wanted to see Ray Donovan of the TV series.
I saw the first season. I didn't get past that one, but he's really good in that. I mean, like you said, he's got this big presence. He's very believable as a tough guy, as a fixer type guy. And you can totally believe that he's who he says he is in that role. Hell, I wouldn't mess with Liev Schreiber on the streets. He's a big dude. You don't realize it until he's like towering over Daniel Craig a little bit. You're kind of like, wow, he in their little fight scene, their little matchup, you go, man, Daniel Craig would have been wrecked by Liev Schreiber. He's kind of like, I don't know that James is getting out of this one. This is James Bond's toughest villain. It's his brother, Liev Schreiber.
I wish he had a cameo, but I don't believe he did in that Wolverine movie.
No, they didn't bring him back.
They brought back the other one.
Yeah.
The other guy, which was a funny scene. Yeah. Did you see the movie?
I did. Loved it. I mean, brilliantly done. Yeah.
Yeah, I loved it. It's fun.
But okay. Denzel, so he is in a really good movie, The Manchurian Candidate, the remake.
That's right. I was thinking the same film.
That. Oh, yeah. Brilliant film. I actually thought that was a Zwick film because it has a feel of it, but it wasn't. So I was kind of hoping it was. I'd love to have gotten that in this podcast.
Oh, sorry. He has no connection whatsoever. You got to start
my own, a lead podcast, a lead
Okay, here we go. The bread and butter. Daniel Craig starring. He's on the front cover. This is now. I think this is going to sound like a criticism. Maybe it is. Maybe the one thing that I thought, having Daniel on the front cover. When you look at the front cover, just the movie poster, it's a great shot. You see Daniel holding a weapon, hiding behind a tree. He looks very James Bond-esque here. Now, keep in mind,
a little bit,
he just had filmed and released before this film, so he's now James Bond. This film comes out, and he's already on the big screen as the new James Bond at this time. He just did Casino Royale, but that was the only one film he had done before this one. He has one James Bond film under his belt when this one comes out. You're right about the star quality has risen just a bit. I don't blame the company. I don't blame them for showcasing his mug a little bit, having this image on the poster. It doesn't tell the story that's in the film. It's a little misleading.
Absolutely. That's what I thought the movie was about, a band of rebels, Jewish rebels who had gone into the woods to fight the Nazis.
That's right. I agree too. So I went in this blind too, and I knew this film cover. This all I knew. I'd never seen a trailer. If I have seen a trailer, it's been 16 years. So I don't remember. I didn't know anything about the film. I didn't even know it was based on a true story. I knew it was World War II in that area. Here's what I thought. I thought he was German, and he was defying the German.
Makes sense. Blonde hair, blue eyes.
Yeah, I know. Blonde hair, blue eyes. And he was defecting from the Germans, helping. This is like the white savior complex issue in films that we have, which I'm sure would have been a good film. But I thought, oh, here's another Tom Cruise Last Samurai coming in and saving the Jewish people from this German blue-eyed guy played by Daniel Craig. I still thought this all the way through. And when he shows up on screen and meets him in the forest, he comes, enter Daniel Craig 10, 15 minutes into the film, whatever it was. I thought he was a soldier. And when they first saw him, because he was wearing kind of like civilian clothes, that he had run away from the, it's like, oh, I too am on the run and I will help you guys in your cause. But he's like, oh, hey, brother. I'm like, what? They're brothers? Casting wise, he does not look the part. So I'm going to get that out of the way because I thought he was German. I thought he was a German.
Everyone
defector.
else in that community, and including his brothers, all have dark hair.
Yeah.
And dark.
And so he didn't look the part. He looked like Daniel Craig.
So, but yes, he stands out like a sore thumb. Once the movie gets going, you ease into it that here's our main character. But yeah, every time they're, he and the community are moving, you're like, my God, he sticks out. Look, it's Zwick's telling a true story, but he could have really, he could have easily snuck in and out of his town in Belarus with the hair he had. No one would have believed he was Jewish.
Yeah.
He looks like no one else in their town. Like even the Jewish people had to be like, "Why? Are we following him? Are we sure?"
Yeah, why we following? That's why he had trouble leading the Jewish people, is because he's the least looking.
He's exactly what they want. Like that's what they're talking about. He looks like
he looks like Hitler's a great guy.
Exactly. That's Hitler's blueprint for the perfect human being, and he's leading us. He's definitely not our Moses.
No. So that all aside, okay, fine. You forget that as the movie goes on.
Suspend belief
you don't have to suspend it that hard or that long, because once the film gets going, and because Daniel's such a great actor, he's such a Hollywood man, and then that's the key. He plays against type.
He doesn't go into any James Bond anything.
No,
none of that. Doesn't use the charisma. Doesn't use any of that. He almost looks like he's. There's that one moment he looks scared. He doesn't know what to do when they get to that water crossing. Like it's his brother who has to help him across it. It was great that he did not play the I've got everything under control all the time. I know everything that's happening. Don't worry about it. I got a special gadget. Especially I think it helps us. We saw it 16 years later. Right. So fans who went to see this maybe 16 years ago might have had a bit of a problem with it because they're expecting Bond. I appreciate, as I'm sure you do, and as hopefully cinephiles do, where you can stop looking at a person and thinking they're their character. They get to play the people. He's not James Bond in the film. So I appreciate him not being James Bond in this film. And I appreciate him actually leaning very far away from it and doing some real acting. Because look, as James Bond, I look pretty. I'm dashing. I'm going to beat the shit out of people. I've got these things going on. I've got everything under control. In this one, he is acting as if a real person is trying to figure out how do I keep a community of people alive in a situation and time frame. You're just shitting stones. That's how asshole pucker tight you are. You're constantly a threat. Every time you close your eyes, you actually become a forest animal. You're like a deer or a squirrel. Every little sound, you're perked up. Is that the Germans coming for us? That has got to be an awful existence to try to survive in the woods, being hunted 24/7, 365. So I thought Daniel Craig portrayed that beautifully. And the fact that we didn't get him he doesn't really have the heroic moments, right? Like if you think about it, all heroic moments go to the other brothers. I don't know if that was a Zwick plan. Maybe it's in the audio.
I don't want to spoil
it. But if at least the movie people got their poster to sell Daniel Craig as the hero, Zwick was able to at least tell his story about the reality and it not being Daniel Craig.
Even when they take on the tank at the end there, that little action sequence at the end there, of course, it's Liev Schreiber's brother.
Who eventually, he does do a heroic moment, but it is Liev who does save his ass for sure.
And now that was the one part. I was like, I knew that was coming. We all knew that was coming.
Of course, yes.
But it's still great to watch. Don't get me wrong. It's always fun to watch Nazis get mowed down. It's always fun to
absolutely. But it's going to happen. You watch enough movies, and then not just watch them, but do like we do, where we actually try to nitpick through them and really break them down. You start to see the tropes. You know immediately the notes that are coming up. Like you hear someone say this and you go, that's going to happen. Someone says the only way to kill a wolf is to shoot it in the balls with a silver bullet on a blue moon. You know that there's going to be a blue moon. A wolf's going to get shot in the balls with a silver bullet. Like you just know at the end of the film, that's how we're ending the film. They didn't say that line of dialogue or show you this one thing for it not to come back. Once you start seeing these tropes, like when his character is like, the Russians are pulling out and they're not going to help out. You're like, they're going to fucking show up. They're showing up, right? Like if they didn't show up, you'd be like, he actually left his brother behind. You have to expect tropes in films. They want to make money, especially the studios. And if they're putting the kind of money into it, they want to send people home usually with a happy feeling, which I enjoy, but I also am a person who enjoys the reality of films too, where sometimes you don't always get the winners to win.
Have you seen that new trilogy that he's doing when he plays Detective Benoit Blanc?
Those are great.
They each have a different title.
Yep. Knives Out and Glass Onion.
That's right. And then they're working on a third film right now.
Yes. Yeah, I think they're brilliant. I think that he's great.
I love that he's got this resurgence. And apparently Daniel Craig said, we're going to keep making them if people keep watching them. So
Rian Johnson, I think, is a great writer-director. He's done Looper, Brick are one of my two favorite films.
Yeah.
I think Rian Johnson has found his wheelhouse too with these. He does a great job with them. So
I think the idea there's no expectation, just have fun, and look at that, they're killing it. So we're going to get to now some of Ed's stories. You ready?
All right, yes.
One day in 1996, I was sitting in Dodger Stadium with my childhood friend Clay Froman. Veteran screenwriter, he told me about an obituary he'd read in the New York Times about a man named Tuvia Bielski who'd survived the Holocaust by living in the forests of Belarus. He had tracked down a book about him by Nechama Tech called Defiance and suggested there was a movie in his story. I groaned. Not another movie about victims. No, he said. This is a story about Jewish heroes, like the Maccabees, only better. He was right. The triumph of the four Bielski brothers, Tuvia, Zush, Soil, and Aaron, who fought the Nazis in the deep forests of Belarus and saved 1,200 lives, was unlike anything I'd ever read about that dark time. Rather than passive scapegoats wearing yellow stars, here were fighters in their fur hats brandishing submachine guns. Instead of helplessness and submission, here was rage and resistance.
We touched on that pretty much, but that's the idea for him. It was, he didn't say Schindler's List, and I don't think he was maybe thinking about it, but he's saying that's kind of what he's saying. Not that we've been there, done that. We don't need to do this again. We don't need to show the victimhood of this tragedy. Let's show a victory.
Yeah, let's show some strength, because there are stories out there of strength. Yeah. I'm glad he went with this story and stayed away from that, because that is your standard Holocaust story a lot of times.
Because the closer one looks at real-life heroes, the less they conform to the simple verities Hollywood finds easiest to peddle. But the Bielski brothers were men of flesh and blood. It was said they were like blocks of wood, raised wild in the forest, uneducated, unsophisticated, volatile, sexually predacious, fiercely loyal, at times murderous, at times merciful. They were the least likely of leaders. Yet these flawed men confronted daunting moral decisions, whether to seek vengeance or rescue others, how to recreate a sense of community among those who had lost everything, how to keep faith alive when all evidence was that God had turned away, and gradually, reluctantly even, they rose to the task, discovering in themselves something extraordinary.
Now, we didn't really touch upon that, but he brings up the point that does showcase in the film. You're rooting for them in the sense that, yes, you do not want to see this community killed, but particularly the two older brothers, they do commit acts or decisions that are, you're like, ooh, I don't know if I would do that. Yeah. Craig's older brother, he goes into that, one of the more brutal scenes, but I know it's a revenge killing. His parents were killed, and they were killed by the law enforcement of the town that were being pressured by the Nazis to kind of turn on their own people. They did, and his parents were murdered. So he goes into the police chief's whatever while they're having family dinner, kills his two sons, kills the father at the dinner table, and the mother is like yelling, "Well, just kill me too." Kill me too. And you're just like, oh my gosh. And he just walks away. No, you're going to live with the death of your family, which is even worse. And so it's a brutal scene. When that happened, I thought we were going to get that at the end of the film, because I didn't know the film. I didn't even know it was a film about survival. I thought the film was going to be about, again, him revenging, defiance, see if they're going to kill the people that killed his family. Oh no, we're just doing the first 10 minutes.
What's interesting about that scene is, one, his parents weren't killed by the Nazis. His parents were killed by people they lived with their entire life, who on the dime decided to rat them out without any real,
what do you call it, when the people will change alliances very quickly. Oh, you're in power now. Okay, I like you. I like you now.
That is bloodthirst for them. I mean, look, there's history with those people, right? So obviously the brothers had been in trouble with the law before, so they've had interactions with that family and that group, and those people didn't seem to care that they killed his parents. So he was like, you know what, the Jewish faith, it goes by the Old Testament, there is an eye for an eye in the Old Testament. So this is an eye for an eye scenario. You came to my family, and if I had been there, you would have murdered me as well. So Daniel Craig sees it as, I'm removing you, because not only that, not only do I not trust you, you'll do this to all of us. You're going to continue to hunt us down, because he's hiding in the barn when they came looking for him anyways. He had turned in 15 Jews, and he was happy about the money he got out of it.
Yeah.
You took mine, I'm taking yours. And that's exactly how he looked at it. Is, you took my parents, you took what I love, I'm not taking what you love. The father had to watch him kill his two sons first, because the son went for the gun.
Yeah, I know.
And so he killed his two sons first. Who knows? Who knows if he would have killed those kids if he didn't have the gun? He may have just been there to kill the dad.
I was surprised by the killing of the sons first, but granted, he pulled the weapon. Yeah.
In 2005, while prepping Blood Diamond, I was en route to Mozambique on the endless LA to London flight when chance and circumstance finally favored us. Sitting across from me was Daniel Craig. He was heading home to begin production on his first Bond movie, Casino Royale. It's hard to say which of us was more anxious. Dan was being trolled by the London tabloids, enduring taunts as the blonde Bond. His work to that point had been as a gifted character actor. He knew that other actors' careers had been dwarfed by the role of Bond, and wasn't at all sure he'd made the right choice. Meanwhile, I was overwhelmed by the prospect of shooting a big movie in Africa, also by being away from home for so long. We shared what we both knew to be our first world problems, traded email addresses, toasted each other with Ambien, and went to sleep. Dan and I didn't speak for 2 years.
Meets Daniel Craig, not knowing he's going to work with him later, but that was his first meeting of Daniel. I'm going to go do this film, Blood Diamond. You're going to go do James Bond. But it's interesting to get that idea of just Daniel saying, I don't know, man. It's a huge opportunity. And look, it's a big paycheck too. It's going to take care of my family and myself for years to come. But I'm going to be James Bond. And I remember the criticisms.
He's my favorite Bond. I will go on record saying he is my favorite Bond. I love Daniel Craig. Yeah. I think he elevated the Bond series. It needed to elevate because it was getting dwarfed by some of the things Mission Impossible were doing and what Jason Bourne was doing. They had to move away from the sexy 1960s, basically Hugh Hefner with a gun type of guy they'd had to be more modernized spy in the world we're living in. Obviously now hindsight being 2020, they definitely picked the right guy, in my opinion.
Yeah. There was criticism when he was blonde. I remember the blonde Bond tagline, and that was a real thing at the time, even though the naysayers were won over. But now there's talk that there might not even be a white Bond. Can you imagine the outlash that might create?
Listen, it's like if the person is good, I've heard Idris Elba. You tell me Idris Elba wouldn't be a great fucking
He's too
Bond.
old now. It sucks.
Well,
lost their chance.
Well, some have said that they want that. They want to see Bond aged. You know what I mean? They kind of want to see an older...
I love Idris Elba. I think he's great, but he's already 50.
You think he's aged out of the other thing? I guess
because it takes 3 years. They haven't started pre-production. It takes at least 2 years to film it. So he's going to be 54, 55 by the time it comes. Like, how many films he's going to be 65 doing his fourth Bond film? Like, it's too bad. Maybe
part of the problem with Bond is they don't want to change too much. Like, they keep rehashing stories they've done from the books. Maybe it's time to... I mean, I know they've talked about female ones or whatever, but as long as the character works, as long as the story works, fans will go just out of just curiosity, and then it'll be up to the filmmakers to make it land.
007 is a moniker, isn't it? Isn't that like a...
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So give someone else the new 007 status and make it someone else. Like if it's about 007 status,
you could call it 007.
Thank you. There we go. We solved it. There you go. We solved it for you here on the Zwick Flicks podcast. It has been solved.
It struck me that Daniel would be perfect for the part of Tuvia, the eldest brother. I took a flyer and sent him the script. He read it in bed the night it arrived, and to my astonishment and delight wrote back the next day to say yes. He was moved by the script. I was floored. It was only the first of many times he would astonish me. I later learned that his father, Tim, was among the first British soldiers to enter the concentration camp of Bergen-Belsen. Fittingly, I found this out from Dan's girlfriend, as it was unlike him to talk about himself.
Get a little idea of what Daniel's like. You can just tell. You can tell he's just a good guy.
Yeah, but no reports to say otherwise. But nothing to break that belief. He gets it. He understands who he is, and he just plays into it. He does seem like a great human being. To carry the weight of Britain's greatest character on your back, knowing the level of scrutiny and just the popularness of it, and to do it for so long, and to have changed people from being blonde Bond to being James Bond.
Now people are bemoaning the fact that he can spoiler alert, he can no longer be Bond. Sorry, folks.
Exactly, right? Like, exactly. Be careful what you wish for, folks. You got it.
Yeah. You
didn't want him around
James
anymore.
Bond,
guess what? He's gone.
That's what I mean. Is it James Bond or is it 007? They might have to change the name.
Well, we've already
we solved that. Yeah, that's right. Even though Daniel Craig is the blonde hair, what I love is that he wanted to be part of a storytelling and history that his grandfather was a part of. Walking to the concentration camps. What a legacy. I mean, what a craziness that must have been.
Can't fathom what that was like.
Was it his grandfather, you said? Is his grandfather?
That's what he said, grandfather. Yeah. So, I mean.
Once the production was a reality, I began thinking about who could play Zush, the second eldest Bielski brother. I'd loved everything Liev Schreiber had done on Broadway and off, from Glengarry Glen Ross to Macbeth. His unique blend of skill, size, and raw power seemed perfect. We met for dinner in spring 2007, after one of his performances in Eric Bogosian's talk radio. An actor's actor whose work in the classical repertory is often considered the finest of his generation, Liev was such an engaging conversationalist that it wasn't until I noticed the waiters putting chairs on tops of tables that I realized the restaurant was closing. His thoughts on the character were direct, provocative, and funny. That would describe Liev as well. That someone with such facility for language could so convincingly portray Zush, a loutish, casually violent miller's son, is only the surface evidence of his genius.
Nice words for Liev, of course.
Yeah.
Not surprising. We touched on that about, like how Ed said it too. Size, his voice, his stature. I would suspect that Liev is probably, if you were to measure his IQ, he seems like he's an intelligent person. I don't know why you get that with him. Yeah, you get that feeling that he's
He's really great with the English language, being able to speak and pronunciate. So that you automatically know he's kind of some kind of, at least, I mean, not classical education, but at least a higher education where if he's going to be a stage actor, if he's really known for that, being able to be into dialect and be able to use dialect for your benefit on the stage makes him, you just can assume immediately that he is smarter than his looks. He may look like he could knock down a tree, and he can. He's got that dual threat where he's smart and strong. And so that's a big threat. And that's what you get in this film from him. He's just country strong. He looks huge.
Yeah.
So. And I love the names. I love Zeus. Like it almost feels like it's like its own god, like a Greek god type of feel to the names just feel more godly like, or just like, I don't know, foreign in a way, but in a the way they say the names, you're like, man, that's a really cool name.
When, a few years later, I cast him as chess grandmaster Boris Spassky in Pawn Sacrifice, a role that demanded he perform scenes entirely in Russian, the Russian actors playing opposite him swore he was a native speaker. He was the perfect implosive foil to Tobey Maguire's opaque, emotionally volatile Bobby Fischer, and his stillness and subtlety of reaction in the close-ups during the matches rivaled the finest silent movie acting since John Barrymore.
All right, so it's a little bit of a tease coming up on our filmography journey. I will be doing Pawn Sacrifice, a movie I have not seen yet, and I didn't know that Liev was in this. I love it when directors get somebody back again, so obviously they had a good working relationship for that to happen,
Whoever has the dialect coaches over there were phenomenal. I really believe they were speaking Russian. For the fans who haven't watched this, you're going to hear it in Russian, and then you're going to hear them speaking in English, and I think that was the way for them to go. When they're speaking English, that's them speaking in their native Yiddish tongue. And then when they're speaking in Russian, it's them speaking in their country tongue. It took me a minute to figure out why we're doing this. And then I was like, oh, I get it. This is when the community's talking in English, they're speaking Yiddish. They're speaking the Jewish tongue. When they're talking with the Russian soldiers or people not of the Jewish faith, they're speaking in Russian so that they're now speaking with their actual native tongue as opposed to their religious tongue. Look, we're Americans. Some people can't make it through Inglourious Basterds because it's in like 7 different languages, but it's like, we can't read.
I actually watch all my movies and TV shows with captions.
Really? That's a big thing nowadays. People do now.
I find it's more and more people are.
I mean, I love foreign films, so I watch them with captions. I have no problem with that. But I do find that if I'm watching captions, I do spend more time looking down.
I hear you, and you're not wrong because you are looking at the words.
You're looking down to read it.
The majority of film is not visual, especially if you're watching like a courtrouse drama.
True, language is very important. Yes, what you're saying. Yes,
so much dialogue gets missed because I'm looking at the actor's eyes or their hairdo.
I hear you. You're focusing more when you're reading it.
Yeah,
but see, I'm the kind of person who, after the first time seeing the movie, I actually prefer. Now that I know what's going to happen, I prefer watching the things that I'm not paying attention to because I'm supposed to focus on. I like saying, oh my God, there's so-and-so doing this. Yep. Oh my God, how did I miss that? Like, I like that. But if I'm reading the captions, I'm not looking for that anymore. Watch the movie the first time with captions, fine, do what Ryan says, but then try without it. And now that you know what the story is, see what you're missing while you're reading.
There's movies that I've watched, of course, 100 times, like the Rocky series, for example. And when you watch with captions, I've done it with my co-hosts, other people who swear they've seen the films 100 times, and I'll do the reviews with them with the captions on. And my co-hosts will be like, I had no idea they said that. Whatever that thing
Stallone,
is.
Stallone.
No, not just Stallone. How dare you? We're talking about other actors and side scenes, but you're right. But that's just it too. There's some people with heavy accents or marble mouth. I have marble mouth, I swear. But there's no argument for or against. Enjoy the films as you are. But I find I'm such a dialogue person that you'll get it very quick. What I do now is I'm a pretty fast reader. So the captions will come on a half a second, 2 seconds before they say it. I'll read it. and then watch them talk it. So I'm actually know what they're saying. You'll get to the point where you become adept at it, where you're reading it. You're not reading along when they're talking. You're literally saying, "Hi, how are you doing today, Charles?" I've read that in my mind in this, because you imprint read. You don't read every word like you read a book. You just see it. So I already know what they're going to say when they're saying. So it's hard to explain. But
so you go to closed caption movies only?
So when I saw Dune 2 in the theaters, a fantastic film. I loved the Dune films. The first two are amazing films.
Oh, yeah. Villeneuve was amazing.
Yeah. I even took my kids. They loved the films too. But I saw the second film in the theater with the family, and I was like, I don't know what anyone's... I'm not even joking, because it was so loud and bombastic. Now, it was beautiful, and I know the story, so I was able to follow the story, but there's dialogue. I just, between Javier Bardem, the way he speaks, right?
True. Yeah.
Tons of that kind of speak. Great actor, but I don't know what the F he's saying. I watched it again when it came on streaming. I watched it like a few months later. It was a whole new film. I was like, that's what they're saying. I had no idea what half the time. I loved the film, but when I was watching the theaters, I was like, don't stress out about Ryan. You get to watch it again, like you were saying. I get to watch it again with the cat. That's what they're saying. Anyways, that's what I'm getting. I missed so much dialogue in the theater. Okay.
To play young Asoil Bielski, I chose Jamie Bell, who'd been marvelous at 14 in Stephen Daldry's film adaptation of Billy Elliot. At 22, like Asoil, he was no longer a boy, but not yet a grown man. This moment of suspension was precisely the story I wanted to tell, about a young man who comes into his own in the harshest of conditions. Daniel, in particular, forged a strong bond with Jamie, taking on the kind of fraternal, protective role an elder brother would have in such circumstances.
That translates in the film too. Because they spend a lot of time together, because Liev's character probably didn't spend a lot of time on set together, because once Liev, in the beginning and the end, they come back, but in the most part, Liev is off with the Russians. His character Zust is off with the Russians fighting. So it makes sense that he would build a good rapport with those two, because they're doing a lot of the heavy lifting in those other scenes together.
Yeah, it's actually a good point that it worked out that way. The two heavies, so to speak, the two leads had to lead two different parts of the film for quite a while there. So yeah, good point.
George MacKay was only 15 when I cast him as Aaron Bielski, the youngest brother. To my horror, he arrived on the set for his first day of shooting with his face swollen by a black eye, having run into a lamppost, or so I was told. Though barely able to see, he insisted he was able to work. I scrambled and wrote in a difficult stunt to justify his condition, which George performed with aplomb. He immediately became a favorite of the actors playing his older brothers, who treated him with exactly the kind of rough good humor you might expect. Whatever we put George through was nothing compared to the beating he was to take 11 years later as the lead in Sam Mendes' extraordinary World War I saga of The Lost Soldier in 1917.
So high praise again from Ed.
So that's awesome, because I did notice towards the end of the film that his face was swollen. I knew there had been that was from the air raid thing, so it made sense, but I did not know that was real. That's amazing. It's kind of like with the Luke Skywalker got in a car crash, and so they had to have this scene of him getting hurt, be attacked by the Wampa, to understand why he had the scar on his face where he almost died in the car crash after
that's
A New
crazy.
Hope. So that's on your feet thinking. This is why Ed Zwick and Lucas, that's why these guys are where they are, is because they have the foresight to go, okay, this is a problem, but it's not a problem. If he had bumped his face and he was in some kind of crime drama, he's in a courtroom and he's playing like the bailiff, now we've got issues. When you're releasing an action film, you can add action that will now make the audience, like myself, think it was just a makeup effect. And this is the first time hearing it that it's not. So that's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to learn that was the real thing.
So it was quite the little injury that he had there, and they tied it.
I mean, it was swollen. I was like, man, they really did a great job with that prosthetic swelling. I'm like, he looks like he just got hurt. And at the end of the day, it was real.
Toward the end of the first Friday of shooting, Liev, Clay, and I were standing together in the partisans' camp when one of the extras approached us and asked if they could have a Sabbath Kiddush at Rap. He explained they were part of the tiny group of Jews still living in what was once the largest and most vibrant Jewish community in Eastern Europe. It would mean a lot to them, he said, as well as be a blessing for the film. As it grew dark, craft services provided bread and wine while the special effects team lit oil lanterns. An aged rabbi stepped forward, and as he intoned the prayer, I looked over and saw Liev's face, full of feeling in the flickering light. He had told me his research for the movie had allowed him to dig deeper into his own Jewish roots, and I assumed he was thinking of his ancestors. I knew Liev's maternal grandfather had emigrated from Ukraine to the United States, so it came as no surprise when I heard after Russia invaded that country in 2022 that he was among the first celebrities to work with the World Central Kitchen, cooking 2,000 pounds of brisket to provide a traditional Passover meal for refugees from that war.
That's awesome. And that's great that Zwick, and you would hope that even if the director of the film wasn't Jewish, that they would understand whether, like, I'm not a religious person, but that if I was on that set, there's just something about allowing people to embrace their traditions, their history, who they are. Because as a teacher, I have kids from all over. Of course. Where I live in New York, we have kids from Arab nations, from Hispanic nations, all over, Asian nations. So the different holidays they celebrate, we always are just very open to letting them celebrate. Like that's what America was. It's what we're supposed to be, is very open to other people's beliefs and celebrations. And I think it's very cool. Not only that, but you get a chance to be a part of something you've never been a part of either. If you're not a Jewish actor that day, or you know, I'm sure some of the guys on the crew weren't, but to be a part of something, to see a tradition, especially given that the circumstances of the film you're talking about. I heard you talk about Glory, but like when they broke out into hymnal in the camp scene, like it's got to be kind of this chilling moment to almost be living a part of history, being like almost brought back to life on your set of your movie. So I would hope that any director would have been very open to saying, I actually feel like we would be doing a disservice if we aren't doing this exact same thing. It's really cool that they were able to do that. I'm sure that was a very moving experience for everyone involved, and a chance to live someone else's history at the same moment.
Well said.
There was no need to instruct the actors to shiver. They were shivering for real. When I once dared compliment Dan, who I don't think ever once took refuge from the cold in his trailer, he looked perplexed. Not hard to act cold when you're facing your nuts off, he said. In other words, no conversation about Stanislavski was required to communicate a motivation as simple as survival. Whether an actor was digging a trench, peeling a potato, or loading a weapon with frozen fingers, the story was telling itself.
I hate being cold.
That's the worst. In the military, you learn to be cold a lot. You learn all the little, you got to keep moving your feet, stomp your feet. Yeah. There's all these little things you can do to try to stay from being cold. But once you let cold seep into your mind, it does not disappear. It is a long fucking day. And you like look at your watch, like I got 8 more hours to go on this 12-hour shift. It's you got to find it. You got to dig deep to get past the cold.
And I did notice during the film, and they did film in the winter, that snow that you saw in the film was all real weather, weather that they were in. They used it in the film, was amazing. And yeah, you could see that the actors, that's what Ed is saying, they didn't have to act cold. They were cold, and it's portrayed in the film, which then made me think they're still just on a film. And they're only there for, you know, whatever the time was to film. They go home at the end of the day. They're not living there overnight, but they're filming in the cold is what I'm saying. But those people were there. The real people that were
I think that probably is what helped them as actors.
Yes.
Especially what we said. They're all mostly Jewish actors. They were too young to have lived the experience, but now they're getting firsthand experience of what their ancestors went through.
So who's going to be the first one to complain?
Right? Like who's going to say something? Like who is going to be that diva that's going to say, Mr. Zwick, it's a little chilly outside.
My hands are cold. My hands are cold.
Yeah. And then he turns to them, your hands are cold? He just starts laying into them about the history of the people you're playing. Your hands are cold? If I was an actor, I think that'd be amazing motivation. Like, yeah, is it uncomfortable? Yeah, but you think about it, like when I'm done, I'm getting paid for this. The people I'm portraying did not get paid for this. They didn't know if they're going to make it. Some of the people I'm portraying are died. There's perspective. I think we all need that. Sometimes you have to have that perspective, like I'm doing something to bring a story to life, and I'm actually living in the elements that these people had to live in for 3 years in the woods to survive, to not be eliminated from the face of the earth. I think I can make my 6-hour shift. I got craft services over here. Like when I'm done from this scene, I go over there and get some soup. You know what I mean? Like these people did not have this option. So I think I can lay here in this snow, freeze my ass off for a little bit, and it'll be okay. So probably, obviously, that whole cast probably had that in their thoughts.
I think so.
And Daniel's not going to be he's not going to. There's no way. I am not going to be the guy who is going to be last. I'm going to be the first one on set and the last one off set. Like I'm going to live the role of this guy. I'm never going to complain. Even if my toes fall off, I'm still not going to complain. I'm going to make it through this film.
Can you imagine? The word got around. Oh, there's Daniel.
James Bond.
Yeah. He wasn't even doing that for himself. That's just naturally who he was too. Like it wasn't even an act. That's just who he is. Yeah.
Him and Liev seem to be like unbelievably. I mean, they look like I've never heard anything to the contrary. And we're in a day and age where things are coming out.
Yeah.
Right? Like things are coming out. And so far, those two seem to be squeaky clean so far.
Yeah. I think we're good.
Moment in the film epitomizes Dan the actor and the man. The refugee camp has been overrun. The end is near. His character was to give a ringing speech exhorting the others not to give up. But what if he is terrified and unable to speak, I thought. What if someone else steps up? Movie stars can be tricky when someone takes away their words. It's my fucking scene, one once said to me. When I suggested to Dan that Jamie might give the speech instead, He was quiet for a moment, then simply said, "Right." Later, as he watched Jamie nail it, there were smiling tears in his eyes. Relationships with actors while you're working together can seem as intimate as love affairs, until they fall in love with the next director, that is. I can't say I got to know Dan well. I only know we spent a Lithuanian winter freezing our nuts off, and I love him still.
It's about as good as you can say.
Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes you just got to have faith in someone else's vision. We all think we're going to be the Braveheart. The rousing speech, they may take our lives, they'll never take our free. We think that's us. But sometimes what people do on a range, I call them range Rambos. When you're shooting at a standing target or a target that's not firing back and not moving, you're the baddest motherfucker on the planet. Sure. But when that live fire range, that two-way range happens, it is easy for people to suddenly seize up and freeze in a moment of doubt. I've seen it happen. It can happen. You don't know until you're tested yourself. You don't know how you're going to act. You think you know until you're thrown into the fire. And then you learn immediately what person you are, where you aren't. And so for having Daniel to freeze in that moment, because we're having this whole big talk about the Exodus, it's coming up on Passover. We're talking about, Moses leading people through the water kind of thing. It actually felt better that Jamie said it because it made him so much more human as opposed to like this, just like, because otherwise I don't think Zwick would have attended this, and we don't know how it happened in real life. But it does feel more like we're trying to do a retelling of Moses through this film, right? Like I'm leading my people out. Now we're going to cross a water. Like the parallels between the Moses story and this story for the film are easy to draw. Having our Moses not be able to part the waters and have someone else step up just gives it that much more weight of that Dan's character really is human. He does have his moment of triumph when he kind of runs around and he actually puts his own life on the line to draw all the fire from the Germans and the tank until his brother shows up. So he gets his kind of Moses moment, but for him not to know what to do. What do we do? This is a giant water crossing. The Germans are on our ass. It's almost over. His brother steps up. It's just, I think that is the right move in that film. I think it makes that the movie more powerful because of it and less tropey or like, okay, yeah, we saw that coming, as some movies with a lesser director would have done.
Defiance was personal to Liev, of course, too. Weeks after the Bielskis visited the set, while shooting a scene in which the brothers discover a mass grave, I found him standing not far from our recreation, a ghoulish pit filled with pale, naked bodies. In the cruelest of ironies, Liev had stumbled upon a small concrete plinth, mostly overgrown with weeds, commemorating the slaughter of 3,000 Jews in those same woods. As I walked over to stand beside him, I saw his face was wet with tears. "These were my people," he said.
That's powerful. You wonder if they even knew. I mean, that's, probably just happenstance. The same woods, they're filming this, something similar happened, but 3,000. Holy shit. That's just like, it's unfathomable. I mean, they do have that one scene. I think that's good. I'm glad that Zwick only had the one scene. It kind of just makes sure that the audience knew what the stakes truly were for these people. I hate to always go back to Tarantino, but kind of like what we Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. If you know the story, you don't need to beat over the head over what's going on with the Manson family, right? They're always the monster in the background that we know is circling us. Same thing in this. The Nazis are always in our back of our minds. We know that at any moment something could happen. And so to have that quick scene, especially the younger brothers see it, to have that, it just makes sure the audience remembers this is what's happening in the background. While you're not watching it, what's going on outside these woods is this. So you get the weight of why their survival and why the need to make this work in the woods is so heavy on everyone involved. Glad there was just a quick, hey, just in case you forget, this is what really is happening right now. And so just keep that in the back of your mind. But now we're going to tell the story. And then you don't know if we're going to end up here. Because like you said, I didn't know the story at all. So I wasn't even sure how this ended. Like I had no clue how this ended. Like I honestly thought when the tank rolled up and they made the crossing, I was like, oh, this seems right. This seems like they're going to get slaughtered on the other end. Like they made this whole journey. And the cruelty of life is you were actually probably safer on the other side of the water. And now you come over this way and then obviously things turn out different now and go, oh, that's how this ended. And you're like 2 years later, you're like, holy crap, they lived that long in there. So it gives you as the audience member feel like a good sense of relief. Like, oh God, I'm glad they didn't all get slaughtered. But in the reality of World War II, I wouldn't have been surprised if that movie had ended with them being mown down by that tank unit. That is World War II. No, I actually feel like this is exactly how it ended. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad it didn't because that's the reality. But man, it would have been a gut-wrenching punch, right? Like, it's kind of like at the end of Glory. When I first saw Glory, they're running into
that's it.
And they face the cannon. I'm like, wait a minute, we don't win this. And Zwick takes your legs up and you go, oh man, I was all built up by this music. I was ready. I was ready to jump into the screen and take on these rebels.
People still lost their lives in that final battle with the tank, but yes.
I guess. But I'm saying like they weren't.
Yeah.
I thought
they weren't obliterated.
I was like, they're done. They have rifles and they've got a Panzer tank. Like they're done.
That's when I knew Liev Schreiber's character was going to come.
Yeah,
I mean, it's cliche, but hey, I don't care. Mow them down. It was a fun scene. It was
absolutely.
Fun scene.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. We needed it after all that.
I'm here for the Nazi killing.
Yeah.
James Newton Howard, Steve Rosenblum, and I flew to England to record the score. We were in Abbey Road Studios. Yes, that Abbey Road. Waiting to begin the session when James sat down at an old battered upright in the corner and began banging out Martha, My Dear. It was on this very piano in this very room that Paul had recorded it. Closing my eyes, it could have been 1968, and I was there with the lads. Later, when Josh Bell, one of the world's foremost violinists, arrived, I was in for yet another musical treat. As he began to play James's score, the power and virtuosity of his solos was overwhelming. It was all there. The loss, the ferocity, the despair, the nobility. Everyone in the booth was weeping. For good reason, James was later nominated for an Oscar for his work.
You know, it's funny. Ed's worked with a lot of people in his filmography who get nominated and or win Oscars. I mean, from Glory, Denzel won for Best Supporting Actor.
Yep.
I think Leo was nominated for Blood Diamond.
Yep.
I mean, it's amazing how many of his films have been nominated for awards. He seems to bring out, as a director can and should, kind of brings out these award-winning performances or art. Love and Other Drugs, both Anne and Jake were nominated for Golden Globes, for example. Yeah, he has that ability with actors. I think he seems to work well with actors who want to work well. I mean, he had the issues with Matthew Broderick.
That's his mom.
yeah, that was his mom. But
what a bitch.
I think for the most part, an actor's actor and him who like to collaborate with directors, he does very well with it, looks like.
Well, he got what? He had 3 movies in a row with Denzel. He's gotten Denzel. He's grabbed Leo. Like he's gotten some really good actors. So clearly, those actors, you don't repeat with somebody if you think they're dog shit, right? Like you go, you see how it's going to be. And I mean, Denzel, his first role won him the Oscar, and he put a lot of faith in what Ed was doing. On your episode, you talked about how like they held on him till they got that tier.
Yeah,
that's putting a lot of faith in the actor to understand what you're doing and him to then understand what the director's doing. And then he came back for 2 more times.
At an early private screening of the film back in Los Angeles, Kirk Douglas, 92 at the time, put in a surprise appearance. After the credits, with the aid of a walker, he made his way to me through the crowd. His speech had been badly affected by his stroke, but his strength as he grabbed me by the shoulders was still impressive. He leaned in and whispered in my ear, "That was my movie." He was right. Had I made it in 1962, Kirk would have been my hands-down first choice to play Tuvia. When I told the story to Daniel Craig, he smiled and nodded. The next day, I received a hand-delivered note on Kirk's personal stationery that made me cry. In a barely legible scrawl, he had written, "You owe me one night's sleep." From that moment on, if I've ever been in doubt about writing to someone whose work has moved me, I think about Kirk and send the note. The old pros knew what it was all about.
That's a great story.
That's better than an Oscar. I know some people really want but sometimes the respect of your peers or the elders, the ones who come before you.
Yeah.
I mean, we know how it is. Like when you start off at the bottom, you have your heroes, people you want to get to. Anyone in that range even acknowledges something you do. As creators of stuff, you're always battling with yourself. Is this even worth a thing? You always have that internal monologue with yourself, like, why do I do this? But it's moments like that when someone says something that moves them. It humbles you, but you kind of have that pride of like, I moved Kirk Douglas? The man worked with Kubrick. I moved him? There really isn't much better than that. It's better than any trophy you can hold on to. Because that's it's a fleeting thing that's not going to go with you. That you can stay with you. It stays a part of your DNA now. It's in your soul. That's attached to Ed Zwick for the rest of his life. One of the last things he'll think about before he dies is, Kirk Douglas sent me a fucking letter. The day you find out Kirk Douglas died, I'm sure he got a tear and goes, I moved that man, right? Like, who's to say who's the movie's better than the other person? It's all, taste. So that's the kind of stuff that keeps people in the creative world and the stuff that people do moving. It's someone saw you for what you were doing and they made a comment. You moved them, man. You're doing the right thing.
I do like how Ed said there too, how it made him feel to receive that from Michael Douglas. He says, now I do that too. When something moves me or I feel you've created or done something that I enjoy, he does a handwritten note. I like that idea of, hey, thank you. Thank you for that great film, or thank you for being part of my film. And what a great way to continue that, I would say old school, but it's that personal touch of something.
Look, I always say stuff about Tarantino, but it's like when Rick Dalton at the end of the scene, the girl goes, "That's the best acting I've ever seen." He gets all teary-eyed. He thinks he's a joke. He's been told he's been a joke. And all of a sudden he does something and people recognize him for who he is. And it gets you inside. There's nothing better than a compliment from a peer or someone. I know people out there, they look for compliments, right? They want that pat in the back. When you do something and you're not looking for it and you get it, that's really where I think it hits home for people. When you get that unexpected compliment that you weren't searching for, and it really touches you to your core.
All right. Well, that concludes. That's it. That is some amazing coverage of Defiance. I hope people enjoyed our discussion of Defiance and Ed Zwick's filmography. We're now, it's kind of sad to think, but we only have 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. Actually, only 4 films left that he directed to cover. That he actually.
But have
directed.
no fear, he's going to continue this, because once it gets past that, I've been there. You think I'm going to end this, and then you enjoy. You enjoy the discussion with people. So it's like, I don't want to end the opportunity to talk to people I like to talk to. So I'm going to find another angle to keep going with. And that's what I've done, because we enjoy the discussion. We hope people enjoy what we've done together. And if they do, awesome. If not, we still have this discussion that we have.
There's 2 films that he did. One he did a story for, one he wrote, and then these a handful that he produced and executive produced. And I think what it'll do too is it will gives us a chance to talk about other films, other genres, other directors, other actors, and that's always fun to talk about. So,
and you can also speculate: should he have directed it? What would have been like if he had directed it? That's the fun of being a cinephile, right? It's the what ifs. It's the
I can't wait to cover I Am Sam. I wonder who's going to do that with me. I Am Sam. All right. Well, again, Scott, let people know where they can find you.
You can just go to the Church of QT pod. That'll get you everything Church of QT, and then go to the Last of the Action Heroes podcast network. My other 2 shows, Men of Action and Dropping Bruce, are both on there, and they drop once a month, 2 weeks apart from each other. So,
well, I appreciate you being a part of this show and part of the network. We'll talk again about Ed Zwick. It might be I Am Sam, so stand by for that.
Beautiful.